It looks like we have quite a few people in attendance. So I just ask for everyone to have an ounce of patience and maybe 2 ounces of but we may run into a few hiccups along the way. And certainly we will address them if we do run into some either audio or video hiccups as we progress through the agenda. So with that, I believe we have everyone of our board members in attendance, with the exception of Chris Shore. I think he is expected to join us. And the first item on the agenda tonight, I believe, I was just taken off, so I think it's Wilson.
He is here if we cannot let him unmute.
Yes, Jane, Pat Wilson is the one. Do you want me to open up? And Jane is frozen. All right, let me go into attendees and open up Pat Wilson there.
Karen.
There you go.
There you are, Karen. Back just in the nick of time. Patrick Wilson is here. I see him.
So Pat Wilson, you should be able to present your case to the board. You now have it set up so that you can talk to the board members.
Oh, okay.
Hi, Pat.
Hi, how are you?
Very good, thank you. So Pat, I know that you're seeking a variance for a fence height that
Yes.
You're allowed 4 feet and you'd like to have 6 feet.
Correct.
Would you be so kind to explain to the board a few things? The purpose for the additional 2 feet?
I guess I would just say it comes down to privacy and security. I'm right there in the corner near the trail, and the way it's set up, I just have a pretty regular and sometimes heavy flow of traffic that parks in front of my house. So I would just like a little bit more privacy and security.
I am not getting.
Jane, try taking your picture off and it'll give you more verbal. Uh-oh.
I can't hear Pat. I can't hear anybody.
We just lost
Oh.
everybody. Karen, are you there?
I'm here still. It's Jennifer.
Okay, Jennifer, I can hear you.
Yes.
Pat, if you're talking, I apologize. We have our first hiccup. I can't hear you at all.
Oh, okay.
Oh, there you
yes,
go.
we can. We just can't
There
see
you
you. So go ahead, Patrick.
Well, I mean, just in a nutshell, I was just looking to have a little bit more privacy and security. There's a lot of traffic around my house, especially for the park, and I just feel like I'm kind of living in a fishbowl there, and I like privacy and security. And I know 2 more feet. I mean, really, I'd rather have 8 feet, but I gotta go for 6 feet.
Okay, and do you have an existing fence that is only 4 feet and you just would like to replace it with a 6-foot fence?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay,
Jane, I have a question. May I?
yes, yes.
Okay. Hi, Pat. It's Jennifer
Hi.
Bybee.
Hi.
I can't see you, but I can hear your voice.
Oh, okay.
Just from our standpoint, it's always helpful to us, excuse me, if we have some type of a visual. So for instance, is the 6-foot fence that you're intending, would it look like the existing, say? I mean, you can imagine our position like, well, is it going to be pink? Is it going to be, we need to have a sense of, so we
I
can
promise
actually
you it
make a
won't be
recommendation. What would it look like, say? Usually we have a
Um,
drawing or a cut sheet or something.
Well, I was gonna do the dog-eared fencing.
I'm not sure I know what that means.
Oh, it's not pointed at the top. It's sort of, it's almost like a flat board, but then it's cut at an angle on both sides.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
called dog
You,
eared.
you mentioned the neighbor's house on Veneta. Is that the style with the solid wood like that?
Well, what I was thinking, given the good neighbor, policy of putting the good side, I was thinking I might just alternate them on each side, so we each had a good side.
Okay,
That was my original thought.
because the fence you have now, sorry, this is Sarah. The fence you have now, you can kind of see through more than what I think you
Yes.
want to do. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, when I bought it, it was old, and now it's really old. Just the wood on the fence.
Pat, so we're clear. Is this
Yes.
intending to wrap all the way around the corner or just on that one piece of frontage?
I would wrap it around.
Okay.
I would go the whole, perimeter of what the fence is now.
This is Scott Dumas. You mentioned offsetting with the good neighbor theory in mind. Does that mean that from Shady Lane, in some cases, we would see sections of the back side of a fence?
No, it's a style where a picket is on one side and a picket is on the other side, and they're staggered. Have you seen that style before? I think it looks pretty nice.
Yeah, this is Jane, and yes, I have seen that style. The fence is designed so that it looks completed on both sides of the fence.
Right. I mean, it's not end to end on both sides, but it's I don't know. I'm not sure what other word to use.
It's alternating.
They're offset from each other a little bit,
Yes, right.
but it looks
right.
finished on both sides.
It does look finished on
Okay.
both sides. Yeah. My question is, do you have neighbors with fences that are at 4 feet?
Yes.
Okay.
Let me say it like this. On Veneta, not on the corner, but one in, they have a 4-foot fence, and but right next to me, my neighbor that has a pool and a Saint Bernard, she has a 6-foot fence.
Okay.
She's on one corner and I'm on the other corner.
Gotcha.
Basically, it would be comparable to what she has, just on this other corner.
Right. Right. Okay. Any other questions from planning board members?
Jane, I have
Yes.
a question. I didn't see anything documenting it in plan view. Is there something showing it, or is
That's
it?
what I was asking too.
The only thing that I had seen was a survey with a sketched in line,
Yes.
not even to scale. And
Well, it's my survey, right?
yes,
Okay. And I highlighted where I would need the variance.
well, this is where I'm a little confused, because if you're going for an additional 2 feet in height, and you're
Yes.
going to wrap this fence around the corner through the back, is this going to be a complete 6-foot high fence around the whole backyard of your house? Or is it going to meet up with another existing 4-foot fence?
No, it will be 6 foot all the way around. That way,
Okay.
it'll all be the same style also.
Yes, so you're asking simply to replace your existing 4-foot fence with a 6-foot fence that is styled so that it is alternating pickets or boards, so that it is finished on both sides of the fence, and it will be consistent throughout from end to end on your yard.
Correct, because otherwise, right now it's 4 foot It's more of a Gothic style, and there's 3 to 4 inches between pickets.
Okay.
So Pat, to be clear, you're saying right now the fencing is on Shady Lane and also on Brookside Lane. I actually took a photo of it on Shady, but I didn't take a photo of it on Brookside. But it does wrap around now. I thought it was just on Shady Lane now.
Well, on Brookside, it's at the very back of my house.
Yeah,
So it's-
the front of your house is on Brookside, right?
Yeah, it really just barely peeks out from the side of the house on the
Yeah.
Brookside side.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
And honestly, when I talk with the code enforcement person, when I talked to Mike, he informed me that two fronts.
Wait, we lost you there for a second. He informed you that what?
Well, when you're on the corner, you're considered to have 2 fronts. So-
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, my address is Shady, but the front of my house is on Brookside.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
So Pat, when I look at from the Brookside side of your home, I see that that section of fence really just barely pops out, but are you going right on top of that same fence line, or do you go right up to the other fence? Because it looks like there's going to be a 40 or 50-foot long alleyway between 2 tall fences.
Well, I can tell you there is some land between her fence and my fence right now. When we mow, I mean, there's a little bit to mow there. I'm honestly not 100% sure where her line is and my line, but obviously they would, be right next to each other. Yeah, but I was looking to do the same height fence all the way around, so it wasn't, 6 foot here and 4 foot there. And
Thank you,
you can
Sharon.
see where the shed is on the corner of my house. In the fence is at the very back of my house. Everybody looking at the same thing I am with the survey?
Yes.
Okay.
And I drove by there today. I was the one that pulled up briefly, and I'm looking on Google Earth right now at that, on the Brookside side, looking at that fence. And it's going to be I understand your situation. There was probably 8 different people walking as I was just turning around, just walking around the block. But it looks like there's going to be kind of a weird alleyway there, about 10 feet wide for 50 feet.
Would
better way
would
to
you
address it?
recommend that I maybe coordinate with my neighbor and just close it off?
Depends who owns that land, but it's a pretty weird way to leave that section.
Well, I mean, this way the fences would meet and there wouldn't be that alleyway.
Does that alleyway serve a purpose for you or your neighbor?
Nothing. No purpose at all. I'm sorry, when you say purpose, what do you mean?
Well, there's an assumption that it's not functional, but maybe there is a functional reason for it and we don't know about that.
I'm assuming it's probably just 2 good neighbors not getting too close to each other.
Okay.
I'd want to
But I mean-
verify if there's a utility easement or something that might be behind that.
Do you mean in between?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would just verify before you do anything.
Do you know who I would check with about that?
You could ask the codes enforcement officer to check that for you.
Okay, so if there is nothing, then that would mean maybe I could ask my neighbor about just joining it up so there isn't the alleyway?
That would depend on the property line. You could certainly, I would recommend talking to your neighbor. Maybe you just need to make a block off so it's not visible. I don't know, but depending on where the property line is, your neighbor may not want you to go all the way to that fence.
Right, yep.
If there's an easement, I
talk.
thought it generally shows on the survey itself. So if it doesn't show on his and it's something perhaps on the neighbor side, maybe it does reflect on the other survey. Unfortunately, Mike Jones hasn't been able to sign in yet. But you can, as I said, Pat, verify it with him afterwards.
Okay,
I would recommend that you take a photo from a catalog of something of the style of fence that you want to do before you go to the zoning board.
Okay, I mean, it's a fairly common style. I mean, even like on a Home Depot, you could, you know, I don't know, it's just a fairly popular style.
I would definitely include, this is Jennifer, I would definitely include some more specific details and do a very brief write-up. I mean, I think I have a sense of what you have in mind, but in our line of work here and what we're tasked with, we really need some kind of visual and some kind of description. Otherwise, later on, no one can ever really say for sure what it was that any board was making a recommendation or a decision upon.
So you're saying regarding the fence style?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think also
And-
it would be very helpful, I would say, to take a few photos and print them so people have a sense. I mean, we all are obligated to look at the sites as well, but I think it would certainly help to make your case, because I, for one, was just totally flummoxed about what exactly was going to be proposed because the application didn't have a lot of detail in it.
Okay, in terms of the function and purpose though, there's no confusion there though, right?
No, that part's clear. I understood totally why you would like it.
Because if you
Um,
come to my house most any other time, I can even tell you specific times just to come, you can see how it starts to resemble a parking lot.
Yeah, no, that part was totally clear. What I'm talking about is the actual, what it is you'd like to construct.
Right.
Work in there. I could use a table.
I will get that information.
Okay, so I'm going to ask if there's no more questions, if a board member wants to make a motion on this recommendation.
This is Sarah. I would move to, is it support, whatever the word is, approval to the ZBA?
Okay, so your motion is to recommend approval of the 2-foot variance request to the
Yes.
ZBA. Okay, do I have a second for that motion?
Well, I would actually qualify that to
Okay.
say, given what Mr. Wilson has described in terms of it being contextually appropriate and similar materials to what he has, I believe he said, I'd need some conditions on there. I support it in concept, but I think, yeah, that's where I'm at with it.
Okay, I will rephrase. I would recommend supporting a proposal for a 6-foot high fence with 2 fronts, with dog-eared top, that would address in the narrative the alleyway with the neighbor's fence.
Okay, do I have a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, I'm gonna have to do a roll call here.
Joanne.
So,
Joanne seconded it?
yeah, Joanne seconded it.
Right, good.
And,
Themselves, so thank you for doing the roll call.
When I call your name, you just let me know. So, Jennifer,
Aye.
Joanne,
Aye.
Sarah,
Aye.
Dan,
Aye.
and Jane, aye. Okay, so so Pat, we just recommended approval of your variance request of 2 feet for your fence with the qualifiers added. Basically spoke about the styling of the fence.
Okay, so can I ask you, what should I do next exactly?
Pat, I'll follow up with you tomorrow. The next step will be to meet with the Zoning Board of Appeals, and I can explain more.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Pat.
Very good. Thank you,
All right.
Pat.
Have a good night.
Thank you, you too. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is Mr. Brown and his request for some variances, area variances with respect to a shed, I believe. Karen, can you let Mr. Brown in?
He might be on the phone. I don't see his name here.
Tyler Brown, can you If you're calling in, I don't think you're going to be able to raise your hand unless you do a *9. That would, and I would know what number that is. Is looking to raise their hand.
Chris joined also.
Yep, he's been on. Tyler, if you're calling in, can you press *9 on your phone so I can tell what number is yours? I think he was logged in earlier. I thought I saw his name, so I'm not sure if he has dropped off.
If you're just seeing phone numbers, his phone number ends in 179, at least according to the application.
His number does? Okay.
Yeah,
Off
on the application.
I don't see a phone number with that, with those 3 digits. So
Oh, no, 1790, 1790.
719. Yeah, there's other.
That's not one of the numbers.
Right. So I don't know if you guys just want to take a moment to review it, and if he has questions, we'll just table it.
We can do that. Any comments, I guess, or concerns from planning board members that are not direct questions of Mr. Brown that they want to talk about right now?
This is Sarah. I went to look at the site. The backyard neighbor is Tracy Lumber, so I don't think we need to worry about that too much. The side yard neighbor, there's an interesting height differential. So the shed, should it be built, would be very unobtrusive to the neighbor. It's behind some bushes and would be really quite difficult to see, I would think.
Quite difficult to see the shed from the neighbors?
From the neighbor, because it's down, there's quite a height differential. I don't know, Jennifer, if you thought that too, but it was quite a height differential.
Right, this is Jennifer. I did go to look at the site. I noticed the same. Again, similar to my comment on Mr. Wilson's application, I don't feel like I could make a recommendation based upon what was submitted because almost nothing was submitted. The application just said storage. So I don't know what that means. Is it 20-foot tall storage? I mean, I just can't comment based upon what was submitted.
I would
Right.
agree with Jennifer, especially considering the size of this storage shed, whatever it's going to be called, seems enormous for that site.
Yeah, I thought frankly, the application seemed incomplete. So that's where I'm at on it. I think more needs to be submitted.
Okay. I did have a lot of questions on the structure itself before I could respond to the request or recommendation for the area variance. Placement of the structure itself didn't seem to be problematic, but there was a lot depending on the structure itself. So why don't we table this and move on to our next item on the agenda for tonight. And then when we're done with that item, if Mr. Brown rejoins us and we can get some further detail from him, we'll talk about it. If not, maybe we'll just table it, or we'll make that decision at the end of the night.
Make a recommendation based on what information you have then, I suppose.
Maybe, but we don't have to make that decision right now. Let's just table this and move on to our next item. So our next item on the agenda is 547 East Genesee Street.
And I've moved up Matt Neparella and then to start out.
Yes, please. I'd like to start by just kind of reiterating and informing those who I haven't been able to talk to this week that I did reach out to Matt. I had a conversation with John Putnam first, and we reached out to Matt, and then to the full, I'm going to call that the environmental team that they're working with. And this is all relative to the fact that this property is a brownfield, and that last time we were together as a board, in our last board meeting, I had some concerns with question number 16, which dealt with public health concerns. And so Matt had directed me to some documentation that they did submit before in March. So I reviewed that, followed up with John Putnam. We got together with Matt and several engineers with the O'Brien Gear Ramble team, discussed just some concerns, and they then submitted the very thorough documentation, which we all received on Friday, and then you received over the weekend. I did give them, I guess, permission. That sounds kind of goofy, but that we would accept whatever they could get to us this last week, and that we would consider that submission. And so I want to thank them. That was a lot of work on their end, and I want to thank them for doing that. That is the only new piece of information, other than a concise list of all the documentation that they have submitted since they started this application. And you all have a copy of that as well. But those are the only two new pieces of information that we've had since our last meeting.
Jane, we do have a letter from John Putnam dated May 30th.
Well, that's right. But this was, I was speaking directly about what the applicant has submitted. So that's it from the applicant. And then of course, John Putnam submitted his response letter. And then in addition to that, we received 2, maybe 3 letters from neighbors, from community members. And I know all of you, Karen has been sharing all of this information with everyone. So with that, I think, Matt, if you want to, say a few things, there you are.
Thank you. And if you can, I can share my screen. I got a very, very brief little PowerPoint, but it kind of helps everyone. I think I can do that real quick here.
Matt, before you continue, I am actually going to turn my video off so I can get a smooth audio. So I'll be looking at you.
Okay, very good.
Don't be looking at me. Okay, thank you.
All right, so hopefully everyone can see the screen, the title page of this. I wanted to kind of step back a little bit, kind of reintroduce the, how come we won't advance? Oh, there it goes, sorry. My screen is, our project team, again, Devin Delpaz, the project developer with Millstone. Paul Curtin, also on the call, project attorney with Curtin Law. Gordon Stansberry, our traffic consultant, who we heard a lot about last month. He is not on the call today. Charlie Brewer, our construction manager with Huber Brewer. Myself and my design engineer, Christian Hill, all available for discussion today. I wanted to introduce, and Jane and John had heard from our environmental team, but we have Deb Wright on the call from Ramball OBG. Deb is a senior manager with O'Brien and Gear, now Ramball Company, a professional geologist with more than 36 years of experience in implementing site investigations and remediation programs in New York State, and is currently engaged in 2 brownfield development projects in New York. Deb is leading the Ramball team, and that team includes at least 4 or 5 others. They're listening in, but Deb is going to be the leader for questions and answers with regards to the brownfield cleanup project, and as well the potential DEC work plan scenarios. John O'Brien is kind of like a expert project manager in brownfield programs. And he is going to be working with the project team on the development side to implement the BCP program. And John's available as well based on his experience on the management of a brownfield cleanup program site and how that gets done and how that gets processed. Whoops, I'm hitting buttons on my computer today. So the last plan that we all saw, this is, as Jane said, unchanged from where we were last month. So that's the latest layout. With the grocer, with the memory care, and with a small out parcel along Genesee Street itself. We've got the grading plan. We've talked about that, and that's sitting there for reference if we need to have conversations during the process. Essentially, just as a quick refresher, we did the modifications to the site plan. We last month talked about the traffic concurrence from DOT and the mitigation that we will be proposing with regards to this project. We talked about based on the layout as it is today, a complete stormwater pollution prevention plan. Potentially, depending on what happens during site plan review, that gets tweaked and modified. We talked about answers to the comprehensive and design guide. There were questions with regards to the BCP program and the work plan that, as Jane said, we tried to address with a very thorough and complete letter answering part 16 or question 16, which hopefully the board members have had an opportunity to review. And again, in short order, the question came up on Wednesday, and we provided that answer by Friday mid-afternoon. With that, you know, last month we ended with a preliminary review of the part 2, and you know, I would assume we would re-review that. I can put that up on my screen or your screen again, so we can go through question by question. But again, our team is here. We are anxious to get moving, anxious to be able to continue the process that we started in October to get to, you know, really answer that big question. Will we need an area variance for this program to occur? And that area variance requires the Zoning Board of Appeals. The Planning Board is the first step in that process as a recommendation to get us to the Zoning Board of Appeals. We hope we've answered the board's questions. We hope we've addressed the things to get us to this point so that we can continue the process. You know, quite frankly, from October till now, we haven't even gone to, you know, the first step. So we're hoping that we've done our diligence and we can move forward with that. So with that, you know, we're here to answer the questions, and we can go from there. So, and again, our team is readily available. You know, we can, you know, hopefully we can be freed up to have at least the owner and the project attorney to interject as well. So with that, Jane, I'll give it back to you and the board. And again, Devin and Paul and Deb and John and our team members are willing and able to discuss.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Matt. So board members, we're back with this project. And as Matt mentioned, last month, we did walk through part 2 quite thoroughly. And so the first question I have to the board members is, do any of you have any comments or specific questions relative to part 2 of the seeker process? Or I guess any part of the process. Right now, we are in the middle of undertaking our seeker review, and the goal is to advance to a decision with respect to the seeker review process. And so I do want to direct your attention back to part 2 and whether anyone has any questions or comments that have come up for them since our last meeting. Is anybody else getting a weird pop-up on their screen?
Or something momentarily, but it's not there now.
Yes, this is Jennifer. I was getting a strange pop-up
Okay.
image.
It looked like Darth Vader to me. So again, I don't know if you guys can raise hands or not, but does anybody have any questions? I don't want to keep repeating myself if you don't have them.
I think this is Sarah. The big issue is really questions 17 and 18.
Mm-hmm.
I think the answer from Ramball, and I do appreciate that. Thank you, Deborah, about the human health. I feel better about that. But I still think we have issues with questions 17 and 18.
Okay.
This is Jennifer. Yes, I echo that. We identified that 9 of the 18 criteria would have some type of impact when we went through this last month, this document. And I share Sarah's thoughts that there's particular problems which are critical with being inconsistent, the project being inconsistent with the framework plan, and also inconsistent with the community character of the village.
Okay, and that's relative to the questions of number 17 and 18.
Right, although there are 7 other area criteria in the part 2 of the EAF that are intrinsically related to that, because they're all interrelated.
Right, right. I do actually want to take a step back here for a moment and just bring up, or just remind everybody, I know I've done this before. I believe, so I'll just do it again, that there was a particular property, as we all know, because we were involved in some of the process last time, had a PUD application for a mixed-use development, and that was essentially for 2019. And that did end up before the Village Board of Trustees. They went through a full seeker review process, meaning they went through an environmental impact statement. And the Village Board did reach some findings, and they have a statement of findings. We did direct everyone's attention to that statement of findings because within that statement, there was some findings by the Village Board of Trustees regarding alternative uses, mixed uses for the property, and what they thought would be a couple of uses and building sizes that may reduce or eliminate environmental impacts. So I just want to make sure everybody is familiar with what I'm talking about and has taken the opportunity to review that finding statement. Because if you have not, there are people here in attendance tonight who can provide information on that if we're looking for it. So if anybody needs clarification, please let me know now and we can get that. If everyone understands what's going on and understands those findings, then we can move on from that. Okay, I take silence as everybody is doing well. So that leads us back to part 2. I open the discussion to the board members.
Jane, I think Ted wanted to say something.
Who's?
Ted Spencer.
Oh, I see a hand up. I'm so sorry. I would have been a horrible teacher. I never would have seen any raised hands. Okay, Ted. Let's unmute you and
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Yeah, I just wanted to share with the board my perspective from acting on behalf of the Board of Trustees, and I'll be very brief. As Jane mentioned, this project has been reviewed before. Personally, I am neither in favor of it or opposed to the project, so I don't want you to think I'm trying to direct you to a particular outcome. But from a legal perspective, I think it's important that the planning board factor into its current decision-making process the fact that the village has an established history with seeker review of this particular parcel. And whatever decision the planning board makes would, in a perfect world, be consistent with the prior seeker determination and findings. So, know about the 2019 project. The village board adopted a positive declaration and is required under the regulation, issued some findings. The findings included 4 alternative options for potential development of this site, which the trustees identified as acceptable from a seeker perspective, after having gone through the 18 potential impacts that the board's required to under Part 2 of the seeker form. As the planning board now is one of the alternatives is quite similar to the application currently pending before the board. And if the planning board chooses a decision that's inconsistent with previous decision issued by the Board of Trustees, it would be contradictory to the Board of Trustees proclamation on what it thinks the property would be good for, and it would be subject to a potential challenge, and at least in my opinion, it would probably be a successful challenge. So as you go through your decision-making process, like I said, I'm not trying to tell you, you got to do this or you got to do that. But accept the fact that you've got a history you're dealing with and try to be as consistent as you can with the history. So that's my 2 cents, but thanks.
Jane, this is Jennifer. Can we hear from
yeah.
Fred Marty, who's our planning board attorney on that issue? Because this is a totally different project
Yeah,
than what was considered before.
I have a question for Ted first. And I know that whoever is at 315 something something 804, you have your hand raised. I don't know who you are. We will get to you. Just so you know, you can keep your hand up. I do see it. But Ted, I have a question for you. It does speak to the context of this finding statement, alternatives decision by the Village Board of Trustees. I need, because you have stated that our decision needs to be consistent with that decision. So I need some clarification, please. That decision said, and I'm paraphrasing here, in the finding statement, it stated that a mixed use proposal with a building at 60,000 square feet that might be a grocery store and a building at 40,000 square feet that might be a residential building, senior housing, would either eliminate or reduce or mitigate some of the environmental concerns that were identified and discussed based on the PUD application. Okay, so the question I have is, it is my interpretation of those findings that they were stated under a context of a PUD application because it is in direct conflict of a industrial zoning, an application for a proposed development under an industrial zoning district because that has a maximum square footage limit. So unless you, because honestly, I did not go all the way back deep into the DEIS. If that very issue, the maximum building restrictions under an industrial zoning district was discussed and vetted through the DEIS, then I guess I need that clarification. So could you please help me understand those distinctions?
Well, I don't have that DES in front of me, so I can't answer that particular question. But my point was that the Board of Trustees did go through the 18 criteria required under Part 2 of the seeker, as you guys are doing this evening. And I presume they took into consideration all issues raised by Part 2 in reaching their findings and their suggested alternatives. And yes, they did it in the context of the development of an apartment complex mixed use project in an industrial site, at which they determined wouldn't work. And so that project died, but they suggested the 4 alternatives that the Board of Trustees thought would be doable. So I don't know, that probably doesn't answer your question, but.
No, it does not square, because how does one decide that 2 buildings, you know, significantly larger than what is actually allowed? How do they decide that that's doable unless they've reached that determination under the context of a PUD type zoning application, you know, zoning approach? And then that makes sense to me. Yes, I can see that. And that is, to me, a very significant distinction. We have this application before us tonight. We're not just tonight, as Matt illuminated, we've been at this since November of 2019. But this application is directly under the industrial zoning district regulations. That is the context within which we are reviewing our Part 2 of seeker and all of those questions. So I recognize that we need to be consistent, and I recognize that we need to acknowledge that the Village Board of Trustees finding statement is out there, that it was made. But I guess I need to just end there with a period. So Jennifer, I recognize that you also had asked that we hear from Fred. Does anybody know who is at 315? Maybe that's Fred.
That is not me, no.
Okay.
No, Jane, that's Marguerite Ross that I think is looking to Ev.
Okay. I'm going to ask Fred if he has a comment or would like to either address my question or try to find a way to further define this need of this consistency statement by Ted.
And actually, it's Jennifer. Fred, before you respond, if I could refine my question a little bit. I mean, really what I'd like you to address is, so I've looked at the findings quite carefully, actually, and these were assessments based on potential alternatives for a completely different type of development proposal. And it's could do this, could minimize adverse environmental impacts. But this is not the project that we're dealing with right now. And that's what in particular I'd like for you to address. It doesn't seem to make sense from a logical perspective that this would be sort of a one size fits all findings just because it happens to be on the same site. It's a totally different type of development proposal in a different zoning district.
Right, PUD versus industrial, same site, but right, different. Yeah, no, I think all your points are fair points, including Ted, Jane, and Jennifer. I will say I did review the EIS. It's been a few months now, but I did review it and I didn't see any, information kind of squaring the 40,000 and 60,000 square feet versus the existing code limitation of 10,000 square feet. So I didn't see anything on that, how 40,000 or 60,000, should be permitted in light of the existing code. So again, I'm kind of at a loss there. But like Ted says, in an ideal world, to some extent, we can't forget where we came from here, and we need to be cognizant of what the Village Board of Trustees previously found. But as Jennifer said, I mean, every project is different. This is certainly different than was proposed previously.
Yeah, I mean, I would add, it seems like it's common sense that we would, of course, look at this. And with that particular project, which we all on the planning board worked on as well, that was the big impact that was of concern there was impact upon schools.
Okay, thank you.
Jane, if we could let Paul Curtin chime in with regards to the legal aspects, I think Paul would like to say a few things.
Yeah, who's got the, Karen, do you have whatever this image is up on our screen? I'd like to put the agenda back up because I think that it'll be easier for all of us to get a fluid audio stream. Thank you. I appreciate that. And then, yes, Paul, you can make a statement here. I'm sure. Where are you, Paul?
Paul, are you there?
Well, yeah, so he's unmuted, right? So go ahead, Paul.
Thank you very much. There's two things that we're looking at here this evening. The first is to in essence complete part 2 of the environmental assessment form and get through the questions that were posed by the board a month ago. And I think those questions have been asked and answered very, very thoroughly, especially with regards to question number 16 with the additional information that was submitted. The second thing is whether the board can now make a secret determination. And it would seem to me that you've got a body of information that has been submitted by the applicant that is extraordinarily significant in every way, from stormwater to traffic to now environmental as well from the brownfield perspective. And so whether it has to be demonstrated whether the issues can be mitigated if they are small, moderate, or otherwise. And I think that the applicant has adequately demonstrated, at least in my opinion, based on everything that's been submitted, that mitigation can be afforded in all areas of concern. The second thing is getting to the ZBA to determine whether they will grant an area variance. And the conundrum is that is the board that will make the ultimate determination whether we can move forward with the project with or without a positive recommendation from the planning board. I don't know what the history is in the village necessarily, but the planning board, in my opinion, could take a position of making a positive recommendation to the ZBA, making a negative recommendation if you deem that appropriate, or making no recommendation. You take no position. Because the ZBA, as you all know, is a quasi-judicial board of relief from the strict application of the code. And that's the only board that can grant the relief is the ZBA, and we will never know until we get there whether they're ready, willing, or able to take this under advisement in consideration and grant the relief that would be requested. So it's a bit of it's more than a bit of a conundrum, because to get there, we've been tasked to do what appears to be yeoman's work to put the issues and concerns that have been raised by the board heretofore. And yeah, I can recall Devin saying back in October, all I want to find out is if I've got a project or not. And I'm not going to make light of anything, but what I am saying is that's the same question today that was legitimate back in October that's still legitimate here on June 1st, many months later. So, yeah, that's something that you need to take into consideration. The other thing I think Ted Spencer touched on, Fred also touched on, we've got, in essence, we in the collective, we've got what is sometimes known as res judicata, the law of the case. And you were an involved agency, an interested board, and participated in the prior application that was made by Morgan Management. Your input, I'm sure, was received by the village board during the course of its deliberations on the PUD zone change. But out of that whole process came the identification of what would be appropriate for this site. And that determination, once made some time ago, has never been challenged. And so it takes on its own life form of having legal precedents that not only the village board would look back upon, but all associated boards should be looking at, because it has articulated what it feels to be in the best interest of the community, in the best interest of the property in terms of its land use and development. That said, if it is viewed otherwise, any other view might be viewed by a court to be wholly inconsistent. And that, would raise to the level of an Article 78 because of arbitrary and capricious decisions being made by boards relative to the development of this property. And I'm not saying that you're arbitrary, and capricious is a funny word anyway, but I tried to describe that to my students when I was teaching. But in any event, we've got what I think is black letter determinations that have been made by the village board that have never been challenged in any way, shape, or manner. And that is the consistency that I think that we need to look to and adhere to. This is a different application, I grant you that. This leaves the industrial zone in place with the application for a variance relative to the building size. But one of the other things that was touched on, not only was the school district of major concern, but also traffic and no showing of mitigation and the impact of traffic on Route 5. If you read that secret determination, there were numerous issues that the village board was concerned with. And that's why they backed away from those types of uses that would adversely impact existing infrastructure in the village, and made a determination that best uses would, as a matter of fact, include those that are being advocated for here by the applicant. So that's been stated. It's not been controverted. It's not been contradicted. And if it had to go to a court for determination, the court would look at the prior determination and wonder, what is it that brings us here today for a different determination? And as Ted said, I think the outcome might be fairly obvious. So what I would like to have the board do is take all this under consideration, but at least move us tonight, from where we are to the ZBA, so that it can, in its quasi-judicial role, make a reasoned determination based on the facts that we put before them. They're the only ones who can grant the relief. And that's with or without your positive recommendation. We would love to have a positive recommendation, don't get me wrong. But it would appear to me that this project seems to fit in a lot of different ways within the context of the appropriate redevelopment of this site, given where it has been, where it is presently, and what we can do with it collectively as we go into the future. So I'd ask you to take all of that into consideration, all of that under advisement. But understand, we've got a prior determination under seeker that does set a precedent, and a very strong one at that. And it can't be ignored. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Karen, I believe the person at the phone number with the last digits of 804, I think they deserve to have 3 minutes of time to, they've been very patient with their hand raised. So can you unmute that person? I'm not sure I can do that.
Yep, I have that.
Okay, so please announce your name for the record, and please, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. This is Marguerite Ross. I appreciate you allowing me to respond briefly. I want to establish for the record that the fact is that when the environmental review and the EIS was performed for the apartment complex proposal, there was no discussion in the draft EIS or the final EIS from Morgan, O'Brien, and Gear as to alternatives that which must be included in the DEIS, in the FEIS. You must address alternatives. They did not do that. There was no consideration of the environmental impacts relative compared to their proposal versus alternative ideas. And that is false. It's not correct that to say that that has already been reviewed and determined by the Village Board of Trustees. It was not done. All that was done is that the Village Board of Trustees added a prologue where it did cover itself several alternative ideas. Those were not reviewed, not fleshed out, and the environmental impacts were not considered of those alternatives, including the supermarket alternative, was not considered. Therefore, I strongly, and I am not an attorney, but my attorney I'm sure will confer with me, that is not res judicata, it's not precedent, and it's not binding, and that is essentially irrelevant to the environmental review, the seeker review of this present proposal. Second of all, I would like to say, unfortunately, because of last-minute submission by the applicant regarding the brownfield cleanup program, I was not able to timely submit detailed comments for your consideration this evening, as I want to do and will do if it's allowed. I want to say that in brief, I believe that there's ample, contrary to what Mr. Curtin and others have said, there is ample information before you to proceed if you're going to make a determination to make a positive declaration. And I believe that is what the law requires. And if we are going to speak about Article 78, I believe that if you make a negative declaration this evening, that will be very strongly contested in court. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marguerite. Okay.
Jane,
Yes.
this is Sarah. I have that piece of the findings available if you want me to put it on the screen.
No, that's okay. I don't need it on the screen. I'm very familiar with it. So I'm going to go back to our board and ask if anybody has any comments or questions based on the various comments that you've heard tonight from different attendees. Okay.
Well, I do. This is Jennifer. I was going to give someone else a breath. Well, I'm trying to think of where to start here. As we've told the applicant since the fall when they first submitted for the project, there are significant issues with the site plan layout, with the size of the buildings that are being proposed. The variances that are being requested are enormous. They are 4 and 5 times what's allowed in the zoning district for building size. This requires intense scrutiny by our board, which I think we have given it. But this is not a small matter. This is one of, I'd say, the 2 largest redevelopment parcels in our village. The existing site plan does not meet the village comprehensive plan, which had a specific call out area, which showed a type of development layout. What's being proposed with this project doesn't at all resemble that. It also doesn't meet the commercial design guidelines. It is totally inconsistent with the community character. And what it does actually with the placement of where the most intensive use, the 50,000 square foot plus grocery store, is it's loading the impacts of the project closest to the residential neighborhood to the west. So in my estimation, I could not support a negative declaration given that we have not seen from the applicant a sufficient response of what is an alternative way of arranging these different components of the project upon this area of land so that it actually could meet the community framework plan recommendations. So it would interface with the street, et cetera. So it could begin to meet the commercial guidelines. And where this all links in with the variances requested is that we've been asked to recommend upon the variances. This is an industrial zoning district. As I said, what's being asked is 4 to 5 times the building sizes allowed in that zoning district in addition to a special use permit. So they're all interrelated. And I fundamentally believe that if the applicant were to propose, say, one or two alternative site plan configurations, that it would address the other issues, because our board determined at the last meeting that 9 of the 18 areas in the EAF are going to cause impacts, in particular to land, plants and animals, historic and or archaeological resources, transportation, energy, noise, odor and light, and impacts on human health. And the way in which the project is designed currently, I believe that those areas will be, the impacts of those areas will be exacerbated. For instance, the impacts are being loaded closer to the residents, whereas in a typical commercial development, especially one that fronts on a state road, you would have the project actually fronting on the state road. And so we'd be looking at lesser noise, odor, light, impacts on human health impacts, were it more appropriately sited closer to the road, as opposed to closer to the neighbors.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Anybody else on the board have any comments?
So this is Sarah. One question I have related to that is, and I believe Ms. Wilson is still on, is the issue, is the issue, Ms. Wright, sorry, that they can't build on the site of the existing building that is the space closer to the road?
No. That's not been, as far as I know, that's not been identified as an issue. They have to demolish the building and they have to either use the existing pad that's there or pick it up. But my understanding is that was the location of the current building is not causing or driving them into a particular site layout.
Okay, so if that is not true, then I don't see why the grocery store building is located where it is. I would support Jennifer's opinion on that.
So I think what we're hearing here, at least what I'm hearing, and I agree with it tonight, is that and as Jennifer has commented, it's very, very interrelated. I do think that the request, that the site layout of the buildings at the size that they're being proposed has the potential to generate moderate to significant impacts on the surrounding neighborhoods. And we have to assume as a planning board under the seeker review process that the building sizes are what they're being proposed, because that's what's being proposed. And it has never changed. If anything, the building sizes have increased in subsequent site layouts. They've not decreased. So it is what we have to work with. We don't get to work with a smaller building size. We don't get to work with a different layout. We don't get to work with a different footprint. We work with what is being proposed to us. It is also being proposed under the industrial zoning district regulations. And those regulations have a 10,000 square foot maximum building footprint or building size. Those zoning regulations were in place at the time that the prior PUD was under consideration before both boards, the planning board and the village board of trustees. As a matter of fact, I understand that's why a PUD was recommended. The findings came out, the Board of Trustees made the decisions they made, and the industrial zoning district stays exactly with the same dimensional restrictions as it had prior to that. No action has been taken to increase the building size. So we are working with what is before us in terms of village code and regulations. And so it is, I am of the opinion that there has not been adequate, the issues relative to the size of the buildings, the site layout, the location of the buildings in the site layout, all those issues relative to that. And as Jennifer rattled through all of them, those issues have not been adequately mitigated. And therefore I think that we have some serious issues there.
Jane, I'd like to add another point, which is, and I don't know why this is being proposed under the industrial zoning district. I don't understand that. But that decision was made before our board was given it to review. But if, say, this were being reviewed under the contemporary business district zoning district, which seems to be a better fit, then the applicant would be necessarily held to supplemental design standards, which are part of the Fayetteville zoning ordinance for the contemporary business district. And among them, they include such things as calling for limited front yard parking, provided it does not impede pedestrian movements on sidewalks between properties and the parking areas landscaped, etc. So it's right away by being in a different zoning district, then there would be design standards that are part of the zoning district beyond those of the Fayetteville commercial design guidelines that would be having to be adhered to. Whereas the industrial zoning district doesn't contain anything like that. And so I think that's another inherent problem with this. And I think makes the variance request extremely problematic.
All right. If we don't have, yep, who is that?
This is Matt. If we can get Devin in, he'd like to respond to some of this discussion and see if we can't at least have some more conversation before any decisions are made.
Okay, Devin,
Loud enough. Devin, you should be able to speak.
Thank you. Can you all hear me?
yes, we can, Devin.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Let me just kind of back up for a second regarding 17 and 18, consistency with the community plan and community character. And let's take a walk down memory lane. This project, this facility has been on this site longer than most of the stuff surrounding it. It is the community character. It's been there over 70 years. So that is part of the community character, that existing building, which is in excess of 32,000 square feet, if my memory serves me correctly. So one of the things that we're suggesting with this is to mitigate an existing large building on 32 acres of land. But all that aside, let's back up even further. Back in October, there was a suggestion that we take a route of the planning board reviewing seeker and moving through seeker before they make a recommendation to the zoning board of appeals. We went along with that at that time in the spirit of cooperation and understanding that eventually the planning board obviously will be looking at this for site plan, et cetera. Our preference was to go right to the ZBA with the planning board recommendation and go from there. I think we need to stop this process right now and stop the seeker completely. Planning board, make your recommendation to the zoning board of appeals, because that's what you're doing. And that's what last meeting we had, there was an application before ours that the planning board said specifically that the planning board is not making a determination here. They're making a recommendation, and therefore the ZBA, they're not going to make a seeker determination. The ZBA, it goes on to the ZBA and they're making the decision. So you don't have a decision before you right now for, frankly, this seeker to even be acted on by the planning board. We should be going to the ZBA with a recommendation. The ZBA can make their own seeker determination prior to making their decision. And no matter what that decision is, let's say that it's to go forward or not. If it doesn't go forward, we're done. If it goes forward, then we come back to the planning board. The planning board can then open up seeker again for the site plan determination or application. And that's the right way to do it. That's the legal way to do it, the appropriate way to do it. It takes the burden off of the planning board, gets you out of a situation where I'm afraid you're headed right now, and it puts it in their hands. And then if it comes back, if we're fortunate and get a variance, a lot of these issues now are no longer a question. Now we can focus on planning issues, planning board issues, and move forward with seeker for planning board. Yes, you've gone through a lot of this stuff. I appreciate that. We've spent an inordinate amount of money at this point in any project just to get a ZBA review, which isn't even an approval by the planning board. It's a recommendation. So that would be my request at this point, is that we stop the seeker process. You make your recommendation to the ZBA. We go to the ZBA. The ZBA can take up seeker for that decision, and then it can move forward from there to planning board, where you will have to do your own seeker. We'll be back to this, but it'll be different because you'll have different, if we go there, you'll have a different set of rules to deal with. So that's my 2 cents. But again, this is part of the character of the community and the neighborhoods. And frankly, I believe it actually predates the neighborhoods that now surround it. So you need to keep that in mind when you talk about consistency with the community character. You look at the post office, you look at the gas station, you look at the property across the street, the Honda dealer, Tracy Lumber, etc. That's all part of this area. It's in the design guidelines as the Upper East Business District, I think it was called. So there are specifics with community in that area, design guidelines in that area, to address those specific concerns that Jennifer had brought up, which I appreciate, and I think we got to stop the seeker process and move forward to make your recommendation to the ZBA, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Devin. I can't react to your comment right now because I don't know legally if we can do that. I don't know if we're jeopardizing ourselves or the ZBA. I don't know enough about seeker law. I know that at the time that we considered how to go through this, that everybody gave it some serious consideration. And trust me, I did not gleefully take this on. I knew it would be a bear, but somebody had to start the seeker review process, and for lots of different reasons, it pointed to the planning board. So I don't know, if we were in pre-COVID-19, I think I would ask Fred for an executive session right now for us to discuss what our options are, because I don't know that your point is, is not a valid point. But I don't know is the bottom line. So I don't know how to do an executive session on Zoom. I don't think we can. Fred, I don't know if you have a comment on this point that Devin's raised. I have never in my experience stopped midway in a seeker review and just stopped cold turkey and made a decision and sent the applicant on their way to another board. So I guess I would say I'm uncomfortable doing that without having some direct advice.
It's my understanding of the law that the planning board has to make a final seeker determination before the ZBA can do anything. So, I don't think that the ZBA can act without the secret determination being made here. So I don't think I agree with what Devin's proposing.
Okay. So,
Excuse me, Jane, this is Matt. So and again, I'm not an attorney, but I've been a seeker engineer for 25 years. So the way I look at it is if we process this thing as uncoordinated review, and that's I think what Devin was talking about, is instead of a coordinated review process in which there's one seeker, we approach it as uncoordinated review. And in that process, you look at the action, and the action here, the first step of that action is an area variance. And I think the planning board has done that in the application just prior to this meeting, the Wilson application and the application last week. Regardless of the size, it's a recommendation to the ZBA for an area variance. So that's what we're asking the board as well, is a recommendation for an area variance. So I guess, Fred, if you're saying, well, we need to do seeker before then you should have done seeker for Wilson. You should have done it last month, because it's the same thing. It's an area variance for recommendation. It's not a decision that the planning board is making. It's a recommendation to the ZBA so they can make a decision. So with that, if we say uncoordinated review, and we're doing uncoordinated review, and then the ZBA takes it on that action, the action for an area variance based on code, and then they make a decision, plus or minus, and then we're going to know which way to go. Then it has to come back for the special permit and site plan review before the planning board. And under uncoordinated review, the planning board then becomes the lead agent for the site plan approval process. So again, I don't know if Paul can chime in as well, but that's my
No,
understanding
I don't.
based on 25 years.
guys,
Well,
please.
that's great, but I don't think you can do an uncoordinated review with a type 1 action.
That was
And this is a
exactly the
type 1
point.
action.
That was what I was just thinking. There's a world of difference between a project of this magnitude and someone proposing a fence in their yard, which I think you could arguably say is type 2.
And I am not going to stop this process cold turkey because the applicant wants it stopped. I mean, if we want to pause planning board, if you're like, well, I'm willing to consider this option, then we pause it and we take the time to consider it. But I'm not making this decision on the fly. So, you know, we've heard from our board attorney that has directed us to stay on course. As a type 1 action, we need to do a coordinated review. This is how we started this entire thing. And the applicant has now heard that we have concerns regarding the proposed project and its current layout. Maybe the applicant, Devin, maybe you can speak to why you have not proposed to move any of the larger buildings up to the front, as Jennifer has indicated, and others on the board. It's not just Jennifer. I'm not pointing her out. This comment has been made over the several months that we have entertained this application. So, and there has been no alternative site plan or site layout provided in reaction to these comments. So maybe Devin, you can explain that. Yeah, you don't have to. If you have an explanation for that, it might be worth us hearing it.
Well, I think, can you all hear me again?
Yes.
I believe we have made some of those. Our original submittal was obviously further up to the street, but if you're suggesting that we bring a building up to the road, I think you're changing the community of the character vastly. I think I think we can do two things. I think we should basically table this discussion or this decision this evening until the board determines or finds out the answer to whether or not we can stop the seeker process. If the board's going to move forward and is going to make a positive declaration, then we pull the application from the table before that happens. Okay, that's how we stop this process, Fred. So that's basically, if that's where the board's going to go, then the application is pulled. If the board's going to go in a negative deck, great, then we can move things forward. If you're going to positive deck me, then we're stopping that. We're pulling the application. We'll resubmit it in a different fashion to the ZBA, perhaps, or we do another tack. But I do not want to have a positive declaration on this. I don't think it's valid. I think it puts the board in a very. I think you're flirting with a very bad legal situation. I think your counsel has made that very clear, as has ours, and I'm trying to protect the board as much as they are, but I don't know what's going on. It doesn't make I've never seen this in my 37 years in the business. Never. I've never gone through this kind of gauntlet for a ZBA application. So I apologize for my frustration, but I believe we've answered all of these things. I believe we are very consistent with the community plan. We are part of the community character, and we can use the building as it is. So let's that's a very, very valid point that we haven't discussed from the beginning. So
Actually, I would entertain that discussion. I think that would be a good discussion to have. If you can actually adaptively reuse the existing building, I think that would be I agree with you on that point, Devin. I am going to accept your offer to table this decision, but certainly we will round the course in terms of determining what our options are with our seeker process. But I do think that there is an opportunity here for a discussion that's relevant to whether to reuse the building or whether there's literally a better approach. Part of the serious hang up I have here is the 47,000 square foot area variance. It just, in all of my 37 years of practice, I have never had such a significant variance request. And I have always taught that if something like that came across a planning board's desk, it is an absolute red flag to somebody is trying to undermine the existing zoning district. Okay, so now that we have both had our barbs out there, I strongly recommend that we table this decision tonight and that we meet and have some discussion about what is the best way to move forward for everyone. And I'm not trying to string this out. I am not trying to cause a delay in any way. I am prepared to make a decision if that is what the applicant would prefer. I think the whole board is prepared to make a decision tonight. But if what I'm hearing from Devin is that you would rather table it and have a conversation in understanding what our alternatives are.
thank you.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay. Back to my board members. I'm sorry, there's a Laura Podesta who has her hand up very patiently. Laura, I don't know if you're.
Or you should be able to speak if you want to still make a comment.
She's muted. Every time I put my cursor over it, Karen, I get the chat option.
Can you
There
hear
you
me
go.
now?
Laura?
Hello?
Hello? Go ahead.
Hi, this is John Podesta.
Okay, John.
This has nothing to do with what you were talking about, but anytime I have a discussion with anyone in the neighborhood about what's might be developed there, and it's mentioned that a grocery store might go there, the reaction is, why? So that's just conjecture. A company wouldn't invest time and money into a project like this if they didn't have data that would support their pursuing a 50,000 square foot full-service grocery store. So I was just wondering what data they're using to justify that when within a 10-mile radius, there's 12 grocery stores from the size of a small, very small independent one to the biggest they come. National, international, and regional stores. And I'm just wondering how they came to the decision that a store of this size could survive.
All right, well, thank you very much for that question. And you're right, we don't have, that's really not a topic that we were on tonight. And most likely won't get to that answer tonight, but
Okay.
we do thank you for the question. We thank you for your interest in this project.
Yeah. You're welcome.
I am going to move to our planning board members. And I am going to ask them by roll call if they're comfortable tabling this decision. And if you're not comfortable tabling this decision, if you could give me a sentence or two, why not? So I'll start with Dan.
Yeah, I am comfortable tabling it for now. I've talked with a lot of you. I've spoken at other applications for this site, and I still believe that this site has the opportunity to it's the gateway into the village, and it has the opportunity to really be something more than a grocery store if the developer saw that. And it has the opportunity to be imaginative and to be a part of the village and to I guess really endear itself to the village and be a part of the fabric. To say that an empty 130,000 square foot building is the character of the village is I think naive and it a little bit upsetting. But I am comfortable tabling this for now.
Thank you, Dan. Jennifer?
Yes, I'm comfortable tabling the discussion.
Okay. Sarah?
Hi, I'm comfortable tabling. However, I would like to not just be here next month. So I'm wondering what intervening steps would be appropriate in terms of communication between meetings.
It's a great question. And if you don't mind, I'm going to ask for Joanne's comment, and then I'd like to address those questions. Is that okay, Sarah?
That's fine.
Okay, so Joanne?
Hi, Jane. I'm comfortable tabling it as well.
Okay, very good. Chris, I know you're not a voting member, but I would like to hear your opinion.
I'm okay with tabling it.
And Scott?
I'm comfortable tabling this.
Okay, so Sarah has raised a great question, and I'm very interested in making sure that we don't just show up a month from now and say, okay, what did we decide and where are we? We have to make real progress within the next 30 or so days. So I would state that the first step is that I would have a conversation with Fred, and if need be with Paul and other attorneys, and to make a very hard decision on what we can and cannot do in terms of the seeker process. And then I'd also, I think I'd like to invite, and whether we open this up to a full meeting, this next comment is going to be very hard because we are still not meeting in person, but I'd like to have a conversation with the applicant, with Matt, and to understand what other alternatives there are, other avenues there are, and so that we can understand all of our options, and so that we have a game plan set up for next month. And if it is a matter of just switching, I don't know, switching steps in the middle of the seeker process, but leaving the application on the table as is, then, and we all know that we're going to do that, and we know how we're going to do that, then that's the avenue. If that's not the avenue and it's literally a matter of, amending the application in some fashion. So you don't need variances of that magnitude. Then if that's the avenue, then that's it. But we don't know those answers yet. But to Sarah's point, we don't want to wait until next month to figure it out. We need to figure it out within the next, literally the next several weeks, so that we can get prepared and have the documentation, whatever it is we need for next month. So does that sound acceptable to the board? It's a lot of work. It's going to be a lot of coordination on my end, but I'm willing to undertake it because I do think everybody at the table here, everybody who's in this meeting tonight, is very serious about what's being proposed on both sides. And so some hard work is ahead of us, but I think only good things come out of hard work. So with that, I think, Sarah, since you posed the question, if you have anything, point of clarification or anything you want with respect to my answer to your question, please say so. Otherwise, I think we're ready to table or at least table this item, agenda item.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
So Jane, this is Matt, and listening into the conversations, and it is so difficult here. The system, ran into some glitches again about the presentation and some things. I mean, I know in other areas we are able to have meetings less than 10 people, and maybe if we can, in this interim period, work on a work session type of scenarios where we can meet with 2 or 3 members and 2 or 3 members from our side, and hash some of these things out. So in a work session venue that even if we have to do it on a picnic table outside and stand back with boards or something, we've got to, we got to figure this out. And it is a development piece that is important to the village as well on many venues, and what the entire country is going through and what's gone through the last 3 months. Economics are also play a picture into how we can develop this site. So I'll leave it at that. But I think in the next, today's only Monday, I think by the end of the week, we should talk about a plan. And I think that plan has to be some form of work session type of meetings in the next, before the next meeting in July. So that's just my thoughts, and we'll take your lead from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. And I am thinking the same thing. I just I can't put details to it right now. So whether we start in person and however we do it, but I do agree with everything you said. And we will be communicating to figure out creatively how to put it together. I've done it very successfully, over chalkboard and other kind of platforms, but we might be able to meet in person, but we will figure it out together. Okay. So with that, then I want to thank everybody for attending. This is a very important project, and we will see where it takes us next month. We'll have a lot of communication between now and then so that we know where we're all headed when we get together next month. So next month is July. Holy smokes. I'm just double checking, Karen. I don't know if we have, no, we don't. It's July 6th. God knows we're not going anywhere for July 4th. So, okay, so we'll be here. We'll be in touch with everybody. I appreciate everybody's comments and concerns, and thank you for attending. So with that, we're going to go back to our prior agenda item, which is Mr. Brown. Tyler Brown's shed. Is Tyler with us tonight? Did he attend?
I'm not sure what had occurred. He was on, I thought he was registered. I don't know if he had to drop out or wasn't able to make it.
Okay.
So I don't know if you want to provide a recommendation based on what information you have.
It sounds like we'd like to ask for more information about the actual shed.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing from everybody, that we have some concern about the actual shed itself. So,
Right, I wouldn't, this is Jennifer, I wouldn't vote based upon what he submitted.
yeah, so I think we're gonna table that item too.
All right, well, I'll let them know then that it wasn't enough to make a recommendation, so that was tabled also.
Okay,
Would he still have an ability to go to ZBA without a recommendation?
I don't know. I think without a recommendation. I don't know if Fred can help me as far as the codes. I thought if there was no recommendation given, it's considered an acceptance.
I wouldn't think so.
Well, I would think we'd have to give negative if a negative recommendation if we don't have enough information. Otherwise, I believe he can go.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
a really good point, Joanne. So do I have a motion to deny his, or to submit a negative to deny the request for a variance?
Well, it would be a recommendation against, right, it would be a negative recommendation
On the
due
information.
to the fact that there wasn't.
Can
enough
we
information.
condition it such that with the proviso that we preferred to have the item tabled because we did not think there was sufficient information, but that if the zoning board won't act without our recommendation, then in that case, we recommend in the negative.
It's just,
No, that I'm not sure.
I think they're already on the agenda, right, Karen?
It usually is, I wait till the conversation is had here to see what direction it's going to go in. It seems to me that based on the information that's submitted, you could make a negative recommendation because there wasn't enough, and then let him proceed to the zoning board with that recommendation to the zoning board, who makes the ultimate decision.
Or make the recommendation that we feel that it, as presented, it's too large for the property and it's negative. So then they can decide, but
Right.
I don't think we should just let it go.
no, I don't either, Joanne. So why don't you make the motion?
I'd like to make a motion that the application for a shed at 218 Huntley Ave be denied by the ZBA due to the size that has been presented to us, and without additional information, this is all that we have to make our decision with.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Well,
Identify who said second. I can't tell.
Dan,
Thank you, Dan.
okay, so I'm going to do a vote by roll call. So Jennifer,
Aye.
Joanne,
Aye.
Sarah,
Aye.
Dan,
aye.
and Jane. Aye.
So could we communicate to the zoning board that if they would choose to send the applicant back to us with additional information, we would entertain it next month?
Yeah, I mean,
I
it's
don't
in the
think
minutes.
Okay.
I don't think
I
it's,
just-
basically you didn't have enough information or anyone to ask a question about it. So based on what was given, your recommendation is to deny it because it's too large.
Yeah,
It's up to them to analyze it further.
I think so.
Okay.
It's only, anybody can reapply. You get denied, you can come back.
It's too bad he wasn't here, but what are we gonna do?
And it may have been technical difficulties, but we can only do what we can do.
Right. Under the circumstances is what.
Our denial of this does not
No,
cause them to, it doesn't bind their hands in any way. So
Right.
he shows up with information and data for them to adequately consider. I think that's fine. We're not jeopardizing him. We're just dealing with the facts as they're presented to us tonight, and that's what we need to do.
yeah, I mean, there wasn't really justification for the size. I guess you could add that. There was no justification for the size.
Well, there was just not a lot of anything in the
nothing.
application, so.
Right, so
It just can't be asked to make recommendations on these applications that are so incredibly scant. And it's
Right.
Yeah.
frankly not fair to us as board members to be having to ferret out all these details and assume what it is they're trying to do or what have you. The applications need to be more complete.
it's not fair to the applicant either for what we're experiencing, exactly what we're experiencing tonight. So, all right, enough of that. Any comments on the planning board minutes from last month?
I'd like to ask that we review the minutes next month instead, at least for my own purposes, simply because I did not have time to review them. There was a lot of other
Right.
stuff to review for this meeting.
I'm going to ask that everybody review the minutes this week. I don't want to wait a whole month. I think that the minutes are too important. And so we have to, if we get our comments and concerns to Karen by the end of this week, there could be posting of draft minutes that we've all reviewed and are comfortable with, and we can make our final approval decision next month. But let's get to them and review them and get our comments to Karen this week.
That's a great idea. I totally support that.
Okay. Okay, so I will be in touch with everybody. We have a lot of work ahead of us, but I think that it was, it's not unexpected, I guess, that we have a lot of work. I didn't know what direction it was going to take, but I knew it was going to bring a lot of work.
I think a work session of some sort is the right solution, and it may end up, because I believe we can't have quorum, that there may have to be a couple of different sub meetings of some sort. But maybe Fred can advise us on how to organize that effectively.
Yeah, we'll be in touch certainly with everybody as we get more information and more understanding of what direction we're going to take. Okay.
Mhm.
All right. So thank you all very much. Those who are still in attendance, thank you for coming. And Karen, I think does that conclude our meeting for tonight?
Jane, do you want to make a motion to adjourn the meeting then?
I move to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jane.
I don't know, just quickly, don't know if next meeting is going to be Zoom or not. A lot is riding on the governor's executive order that these Zoom meetings were deemed to be, publicly. Sorry. To be publicly accessible. So I will be in communication